Unit 9, mammals. Well, mammals have some different characteristics than the other animals that we've seen. Notice when we look at, we've actually kind of seen a lot of differences in all of these different chordates. The one thing that's going to separate mammals from all of our other chordates is the mammary glands that we have to produce and secrete milk that's going to nourish developing young. Going through our jawless fish, bony fish, and cartilaginous fish all had scales. Our amphibians had skin that was moist. Reptiles had scales. Birds have feathers. If it has hair, it's a mammal. Now, a mammal's hair is going to serve several functions. One, it's going to serve to insulate, to trap body heat and prevent it from escaping. And a mammal's hair can also act as camouflage to help it blend in with its environment. And it can also be used as a sensory structure. Cats' whiskers and seals' whiskers especially. Seals use their whiskers to sense changes in water movement when there's a fish or something else nearby. In addition to this, hair can also prevent water from reaching the skin, like in a sea otter. This is going to help maintain the body temperature. And as we can see in this picture here, white-tailed deer are called such because they have a white tail. This white tail acts as a signal to any deer that's following it, so that it knows to follow the leader through. And then finally, in the case of the porcupine, the defensive quills are actually just modified hair. Now, hair is made up of a tough protein called keratin, which also makes up nails, claws, and hooves, which is why sometimes you'll see shampoo and conditioner commercials talking about having some particular proteins that can help revitalize your hair. Well, when hair is being dry, especially like blow dried or hot rolled or something like that, so it's the heat from the blow dryer, the hot roller, whatever, that's actually causing the damage to the hair, and those products attempt to bring life back into those keratin proteins. Other characteristics of mammals. Mammals are endothermic. Endothermic meaning that they're going to create their own body temperature. In order to maintain our own body temperature, mammals are going to need to have a high metabolic rate, which is regulated by internal feedback mechanisms. For example, when we exercise, our body temperature increases. The increased body temperature signals the sweat glands. In animals that lack sweat glands, the animal pants. When a dog lacks a sweat gland, so you'll see with his mouth open, tongue out, and the evaporation is going to occur in the nose and the tongue. The sweat evaporates, and remembering from chemistry, evaporation is a cooling process because it's going to draw heat from the body into the liquid sweat, which will then vaporize. And so pulling the heat out of the body is then the cooling aspect. Other characteristics, the majority of our food that we eat each day goes towards generating that heat to maintain our body temperature. Smaller mammals are going to have to eat more often to maintain the metabolism. Larger animals, because they can eat more in one particular sitting, don't have to eat as often. It's a difference sometimes having 3 large meals versus 6 smaller meals. A mammal's adaptations for finding, capturing, chewing, and swallowing, and digesting food all influence the mammal's structures and life habits. One of the things that you'll notice is that the digestive tracts of 3 different diets are different. The herbivore is longer than the carnivore and the insectivore. And this is because the fibers of plants are more difficult to digest and take longer to digest than meat. So as a result, mammals that eat plant material have a larger cecum and a larger digestive tract than those that eat meat. Cellulose is a component of cell walls in plants that can be a main source of energy. However, the enzymes in our digestive system can't digest cellulose. So some herbivores have bacteria in the cecum, in a pouch where the small intestine meets the large intestine. Other herbivores have bacteria in their stomachs that break down the cellulose and release the nutrients that the animal can use. These herbivores are called ruminants and have large four-chambered stomachs, where food will come in, be partially digested, then expelled back to the mouth where it's further processed, swallowed, and back and forth, thereby releasing as many nutrients as possible. Along with the digestive system that's based on the type of diet, we also see the teeth. Okay? There are four main types of teeth. They're the canines, the incisors, the premolars, and the molars. And one of the things to notice is here we have larger incisors and very large, sharp canines, whereas here the canines are much smaller. The canines and the incisors are smaller and less pronounced. Okay? Here, these are smaller, less pronounced, because they're not needed to rip through flesh of living things. And these molars and the premolars are large and flat in order for grinding. But in our carnivore, the canines are large and sharp, and the incisors are large and sharp. The incisors are for seizing and grabbing and pincing prey, whereas the canines are there to stab and cut through. And then the sharper molars and premolars for shearing meat from the bones of their prey. In order for a high metabolism to occur, we need a high oxygen requirement. And mammals are going to be the only animals with a diaphragm. The diaphragm is a sheet muscle that's located beneath the lungs that separates the chest cavity from the abdominal cavity. So, and as you see, as the lung inflates, the diaphragm contracts. So when it contracts, it pulls towards each other, allowing the lung room to expand. When the diaphragm relaxes, it moves flat again, helping to force air out of the lungs. Metabolic waste is still excreted by the kidney. The kidney, which is responsible for excreting or retaining water, allows for mammals to live in extreme habitats because it allows them to control the amount of water that's in their body. A constant supply of oxygen and nutrients is needed because of the physical activity and the fact that mammals are endothermic. There is a four-chambered heart, and separating the blood makes the delivery more efficient. Blood vessels expand and contract to help alter the body temperature. Hot blood vessels expand to allow heat from the blood to move closer to the surface of the skin, where it's capable of escaping. But you see, we still have this multiple loop system like we've seen in amphibians and reptiles. Mammals have highly developed brains, especially the cerebellum. If you look, the cerebellum is very small in an alligator, larger in the goose, but very large in the mammal. The cerebral cortex, which is up front here, is highly folded, and this highly folded, just like with the valvular intestines, just like with the gills, we're trying to increase the surface area present. Unlike those other two structures, here we want to increase the surface area for neural connections while allowing it to fit within the skull. The cerebral cortex is responsible for coordinating conscious activities, memory, and the ability to learn. The cerebellum back here is responsible for balance and coordinating movements, and allowing for precise motor development and complex movement. As far as brain development goes, mammals can carry out complex behaviors such as learning and remembering. And the senses of mammals vary. Humans, we are very dependent on our sight. Bats use echolocation, which is high hearing frequencies. They emit sound waves that bounce off objects and return to it. And then dogs rely very much on their sense of smell. Glands are a group of cells that secrete a fluid to be used elsewhere in the body. Examples of glands are sweat glands, which are used to maintain temperature, mammary glands, which are used to produce milk, scent glands that can be used to mark territory or mating, or or an example of a skunk as in defense, and oil glands, which help to maintain hair. One of the things to notice is it doesn't matter on the mammal whether it's dog, dolphin, seal, rabbit, or zebra. The highest concentration of anything except water is fat. Fat is the highest concentration. Well, zebras have a lot of sugar, but the majority. Okay, we still see the major component of milk being fat. And fat is going to be, fat's good for developing young because they're going to need to have that, those molecules that they're going to be able to break down, not just the simple sugars for more instantaneous energy, but the fat for allowing for more long-term energy usage. There's internal fertilization on all the mammals. Usually development occurs within the uterus, which is a sac-like muscular organ in which the embryo develops. The developing embryo is nourished by the placenta. The placenta provides food, oxygen, and removes waste from the young. And as you can see, different mammals have different gestational periods. Gestational periods are how long the young stays in the uterus before they are born. We also see a difference in the limbs and movement. Limbs are responsible for finding food, shelter, and escaping from predators. Even though we see these different things, different structures, grasping, running, swimming, or flying in the case of the bat, we're still covered by skin, covered by hair, and we see the same similar bone structure among all of the different mammals. So diversity of mammals. So if we take a look, we're going to divide mammals into one of three different types of classification. The duck-billed platypus is an example of a monotremere. Okay, this is a mammal that reproduces by laying eggs. The opossum and the kangaroo are marsupials. These are pouched mammals that have a very short period of gestation in the uterus before they're born and the young finish developing in a pouch on the mother. And most of the mammals, humans included, are placental mammals, meaning that they have a placenta that provide food and oxygen from the young. You're not going to necessarily need the orders of the different placental mammals. However, some of the characteristics are going to be important. Things like bats, which are nocturnal and use sonar or echolocation and are adapted for flight. Those are some pretty important differences, even though these animals are still placental mammals. Again, kind of taking a look, monkeys, humans, and apes. Please know that we are primates. and are characterized by binocular vision, large brains, and the big thing is the opposable thumb. And then finally at the bottom, whales, dolphins, porpoises are going to be down at the bottom, whales, dolphins, and porpoises, we're going to see those front limbs that are going to be flippers and no hind legs, and the nostrils of these animals actually develop into a blowhole. Unit 9, Animal Behavior. A behavior is the way that an animal responds to a stimulus. A stimulus is a kind of environmental change that influences the activity of an organism. Lizards respond to a lower body temperature by moving into the sun or into more direct sunlight. Stimulus can be either external, like the smell of food or someone calling your name or seeing a predator, or internal, things like the body temperature. One of the big debates is whether or not behaviors are based on the environment or genes. Well, in some cases it's the environment, in some cases it's the genes, and in some cases it may be both. So, why do some male birds sing during a mating season? Okay. What triggers an animal to respond to a specific stimulus? Okay. What advantages do certain behaviors provide animals? Well, in some cases, male birds sing during mating season in response to an increase in testosterone. What advantages could this behavior provide? Okay. It signals females. It can also be used to tell competitors, keep rival males away from a particular male's breeding place. Animals with traits giving them a competitive advantage over other animals that do not possess those traits are more likely to reproduce and pass on their genes to future generations. And this is basically the key to understanding what nature's doing with our living things. Okay. Animals need an advantage over other animals that lack the trait. So what are some types of behaviors that we've seen? One of them is an innate behavior. An innate behavior is also called an instinct. Young birds chirp with their mouths open and upward when a parent returns to the nest. This is genetically based. There's not linked to past experiences. Another thing that we see is that members of a species begin to walk at a certain age regardless of their habitat. Innate behaviors can be also seen like fixed action patterns. Fixed action patterns are examples of an innate behavior because the goose will follow the same pattern, the same sequence of actions, even if the egg is removed halfway through. The goose will still continue the pattern of retrieving an egg to the nest, whether or not the egg is there or not. Well, an interaction between innate behaviors and past experiences within an environment is called a learned behavior. So some animals learn over time that a potentially important stimulus deserves little or no attention. This is habituation. For example, horses that are in the city learn that they don't need to respond to street noise or to people noise. Classical conditioning is what you would see in Pavlov. Pavlov was a Russian scientist that studied his dog relating the sound of a bell with food. There's an association made between two different stimuli. B.F. Skinner is mainly known for operant conditioning. Operant conditioning behavior is associated with rewards and punishments. For example, a rat in a box hits a lever and receives food. At first, the rat ignores this, but then makes the association with the positive reinforcement and will continue the behavior. Not all operant conditioning is positive, though. A monarch butterfly, the color pattern warns blue jays not to eat it, or else it will get violently ill. This negative reinforcement is sometimes more powerful and longer lasting kind of learning. Imprinting is learning that can only occur within a specific time period in an animal's life and is permanent. Oftentimes, right after birth, the connection between offspring and parent would be an example of imprinting. Whooping cranes imprint to the first object they see, the very first object that they see. Salmon imprint to the chemical composition of the water, which is what allows them to go back to their particular areas. And then finally, cognitive behaviors, which involve thinking, reasoning, and processing information, solving problems, making decisions, and planning for the future. Chimps, ravens, and obviously humans exhibit very good cognitive behavior. The last thing we'll talk about in Unit 9 is ecological behaviors. These behaviors are very much going to look at the interaction of living things with other living things and with their environment. The first type is a competitive behavior. Competition can occur for food, space, mates, and other resources between individuals within a population. Usually these do not involve critically injuring or killing another, however, do have winners and losers. An agnostic behavior is a threatening or a combative interaction between two individuals of the same species to determine who has control over resources, and again, resources being food or mates. And then the dominance hierarchies. This is a ranking from the highest to the lowest. Top-ranked animals get access to the resources without conflict from the other animals in the group. It reduces hostile behaviors among animals. You see this a lot in wolves, baboons, and chickens. Those lower animals do get access to what's left over. There is territorial behavior. Territorial behavior is a territory is a specific area that contains resources, such as food or potential mates, that an individual consistently defends against other individuals. An attempt to adopt and control a physical area against other animals could trigger territorial behaviors. This would include verbal signaling, chemical signaling, and so forth. This is usually territory is usually defended by males in order to increase their chance of obtaining adequate food and mates and give places to raise their offspring. Foraging behavior is simply finding and eating food. It means obtaining nutrients while avoiding predators. And then finally, the migratory behaviors are simply moving long distances seasonally to new locations to increase the chance of survival. Biological rhythms. Animals will repeat similar behaviors in a rhythmic cycle that's influenced by environmental factors. We often call these circadian rhythms. That means that it occurs daily. You understand a little bit about circadian rhythm. You tend to get hungry at the same time. You tend to get tired at the same time. These things that occur daily for you. And what can affect it? Sometimes it's temperature, increase or decrease in daylight, the availability of food and water,